He was just 9 years old when his father was whacked in front of him, and he grew up wanting nothing more than to avenge his death. But after years of plotting, this made him one of the most feared mobsters in the country. This is scarred by the streets, a mobster's path. 9-year-old Nicky Santora had always been a good kid. He'd never even been in trouble at school. That is until his father came home one day with some very bad news. "Nick, we gotta get out of here," he told his son that night. "The family wants me to move us to another state." Nicky didn't like the sound of this at all. Where would he leave his friend? His father, Tony, knew that it would be hard for them to go, but there was no other choice. He'd been ordered to relocate by the Lucasy crime family, or the Lucale family, who he worked under. And if he refused, they'd kill him and his whole family. They were going to try and make an example out of him. Tony had actually refused such orders once before, and he still got whacked. He was beaten up so badly that his face was scarred for life. It was these scars that earned him the name Scarface. Tony! That night, Tony tried to explain things to Nicky, but the boy just wasn't having it. All he could think about was how he would have to leave his friends behind. Then something horrible happened that changed everything forever. Before Tony could reply, 2 armed men broke into their home and shot Tony in front of Nicky. After that, Nicky vowed revenge. A few years later, Nicky was now a teenager and he was consumed by thoughts of his father. Everyone thought that after what happened to his dad, he would end up in prison or worse. But Nicky wanted to rise above his father's fate. The only way he could do that was to join the Mafia. So Nicky ended up joining a gang in his neighborhood called the Dragons. The gang leader was a big fan of the Chinese triads, and that's why they were called the Dragons. The gang leader, his name was Tommy Dragon, and he taught Nicky many valuable skills that would help him in his future endeavor. Nicky became one of Tommy's most trusted soldiers, and he was happy. For the first time since his father's murder, he finally felt like he belonged somewhere. But this feeling wouldn't last forever. Soon the gang was being investigated by the police and the heat was getting turned up. One day, Nicky and Tommy were arrested for dealing drugs. Even though they both swore they were innocent, the judge wasn't having it. "You're both guilty," he said. "I sentence you to 10 years in prison." Once Nicky heard this, he started shouting, "You don't know the truth. I didn't do anything." But the judge ignored him and sent him off to prison. When Nicky arrived at the prison, all of the other inmates began to laugh at him. "Look at the little kid. I bet he's never seen the inside of a jail cell before." They didn't realize that Nicky was not the kind of guy to mess with. In fact, he'd already had experience in fighting for his life. And while Nicky was indeed young, he was also incredibly strong, especially when it came to fighting. While other kids his age were playing sports, Nicky had been fighting in street gangs. Nicky decided to show those inmates what he was capable of. He walked up to the biggest guy in the room and punched him right in the face. The guy fell down in pain. The other inmates stared in disbelief as Nicky stood over the fallen giant. He then turned around and did the same thing to the next biggest guy. Nicky kept doing this over and over again until every single inmate in the room had been knocked out. One of the prison guards watched the entire thing happen, and he couldn't believe his eyes. "Who are you?" he asked Nicky. "Why did you do that?" Nicky simply replied, "They made fun of me and I got mad." The guard shook his head and walked away. No one messed with Nicky again, and he quickly became one of the most feared guys in the prison. Meanwhile, on the outside, Tommy Dragon was trying to make it on his own. He'd become addicted to drugs ever since he was arrested, and he needed money to feed his habit. But he didn't have enough men to deal drugs anymore, because they had all gone to prison. That's when he got an offer from a local crime boss named Sonny Black. "I hear you lost your men," Sonny said. "How about you work for me?" Tommy agreed and soon became Sonny's right-hand man. A few years passed, and Nicky was getting close to his release date. But one day, his cellmate, Crazy Joe, told him some shocking news. "I heard some really bad news today," he said. "They let you out, but it's only to take you straight to the electric chair." Nicky panicked and asked why, but Joe didn't know and just shrugged. However, it turned out that Joe was wrong. Nicky was going to be released, but only because a judge found out that he was underage when he was arrested. He was released without any charges, but he was still a free man. He could go anywhere he wanted. When Nicky got back to his hometown, he was shocked at how much things had changed. He walked around looking for someone he recognized, but it seemed like no one remembered it. Nicky ended up running into his old friend Victor, who was sad to see how much Nicky had changed. "What happened to you, Nicky? You look like a completely different person." Nicky simply replied, "It was the prison. It changed me." Nicky then went to visit his father's grave. He brought flowers and told his dad about everything that had happened to him. "Dad, I'm going to make you proud, I swear it." He then went home and picked up the phone. He dialed a number and said, "Hey, it's me. I'm back in town." On the other end of the line was none other than Tommy Dragon. Nicky and Tommy met up and told each other everything that had happened to them since they last saw each other. But they both had the same goal in mind: to get revenge on Sonny Black. The two of them joined forces and began making plans to bring down Sonny. It wasn't easy, though. They had to gather intel and find weaknesses in Sonny's organization. But eventually, they came up with a plan. They would infiltrate Sonny's inner circle and then take him down from the inside. But Nicky and Tommy didn't realize that they were being watched. Two of Sonny's men had spotted them and were reporting back to their boss. "We found the two traitors," one of the men said. "They're planning something, but we don't know what yet." Sonny Black was furious. "Get rid of them," he ordered. And so his men went out to find Nicky and Tommy and kill them, but they didn't find them. The two had already disappeared. In the meantime, Nicky and Tommy had gotten wind of Sonny's plan to kill them, and they were ready for it. They had anticipated that Sonny would send men after them, so they'd already prepared for it. They'd moved into safe houses, and they'd also gathered their own men. Soon, a gang war broke out between Nicky and Tommy's gang and Sonny's gang. There were shootouts everywhere, and people were getting killed left and right. In the end, Nicky and Tommy's gang came out on top. Sonny Black was arrested and sent to prison, and Nicky and Tommy were hailed as heroes. However, the two friends were now enemies. "You used me," Nicky shouted at Tommy. "I can't believe I trusted you." Tommy simply smiled and said, "You should have known better." Then he disappeared, leaving Nicky all alone. But Nicky didn't care. He had finally avenged his father's death, and that was all that mattered. The end.